What up, it's your boy Red coming to you live everywhere from the Danger Room at Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters to the Green Lagoon down in Krakoa. You know, anytime you get mutants together, it's gonna be some messy mutant tea with O-M-E-G-A-R-E-D-D. Let's go. It's the messy mutant tea with O-M-E-G-A-R-E-D-D. We gon' talk about Logan, Jean, and Scott, and how we really bossed up when he got with Emma Frost. We gon' talk about Storm, powerless and all, and how she still kick ass in every brawl. We gon' talk about Maddie, last name Pryor, and how she set both X teams on fire. We gon' talk about the days of future past, from the 80s to the 90s to Krakoa at last. The mutants bring the drama like a telenovela. So this the hottest ticket since the Hellfire Gala. It's the messy mutant tea with O-M-E-G-A-R-E-D-D. Let's go. It's the messy mutant tea with O-M-E-G-A-R-E-D-D. Let's go. What up, y'all? This is your boy Omega Red, O-M-E-G-A-R-E-D-D, and welcome to a brand new episode of my Uncanny X-Men podcast, The Messy Mutant Tea, where we'll be taking a look at some of my favorite issues of Uncanny X-Men, namely from the Chris Claremont era, because that's the era I grew up with and the one that means the most to me, and we'll be focusing on some of the X-Men's most messy and chaotic moments that they've had along the way, because you know Chris Claremont stayed bringing the drama. On the last episode, we took a deep dive into everything regarding Wolverine's wedding to the beautiful Lady Mariko. We started way back in Uncanny X-Men 118, where Logan and Mariko first met. Then we took a look at the amazing Wolverine series from 1982 from the legendary Frank Miller and the legend himself, Chris Claremont, which is where Wolverine had to deal with all the crazy family drama regarding Mariko's father, Lord Shingen. Through the ups and the downs, the couple prevailed, and that series ended with the X-Men receiving a wedding invitation for Logan and Mariko's nuptials. We also took a look at New Mutants 5 and 6 to see what Viper and the Silver Samurai had been up to, because the Silver Samurai is Mariko's half-brother. And when their father, Lord Shingen, was killed, by Wolverine, by the way, the Silver Samurai was under the impression that all the money, the honor, and the power of Clan Yashida would go to him, but instead it went to Mariko. So on top of that, when he found out she was marrying the American X-Man Wolverine, that pissed him off even more. So him and Viper hopped the plane to Japan to crash the nuptials. I'm telling y'all, this was the wedding of the year for all the wrong reasons. So when the X-Men landed in Japan, they didn't know that they were being watched by Viper and the Silver Samurai, who already had a plan in place to take the X-Men down. But Viper and the Silver Samurai didn't know that they were being watched by Wolverine's longtime on-again, off-again friend Yukio, who we met way back in the Wolverine series from 1982. Yukio is a ninja-trained assassin. She's known as the Wild One. She loves to flirt with death and flirt with danger. She likes to live on the edge and fly by the seat of her pants. And from the first time she saw Logan, she had a thing for him. But she had to respect the fact that Logan was in love with Mariko, which she did, but Yukio still cares for Wolverine and wants to watch his back to make sure that he's okay, and it's a good thing that she did. Viper and the Silver Samurai had put a plan in place to have a secret meeting with Lady Mariko to try and force her to hand over the power, the respect, and the honor, and the title of head of Clan Yashida over to him. And they had also put a plan in place to drug the X-Men so they would be out for the count and unable to come to Mariko's rescue. And their plan almost went off without a hitch, except for when Viper snuck into Lady Mariko's apartment disguised as one of her handmaids and served the X-Men the poison tea. Wolverine noticed it with his enhanced senses right at the last second and was able to stop Storm from drinking the tea. But the rest of the X-Men, including Wolverine, were out for the count. I'm talking about face down in the living room floor. That was some powerful stuff she put in that tea. And when Mariko left to go to the secret meeting with Viper and Silver Samurai, she called for a driver to pick her up and take her to the docks where the meeting was taking place. But little did she know that it was actually Yukio disguised as the chauffeur, just looking out for Lady Mariko, because again, Yukio does have strong feelings for Wolverine, and in turn, anything Wolverine cares about, she cares about too. Even though Lady Mariko wasn't her favorite person, she was looking out for her in honor of Logan. So they came up with a plan for Yukio to actually disguise herself as Lady Mariko to go into the meeting with Viper and Silver Samurai, because let's face it, that's a pretty dangerous meeting to be walking into just unarmed. So Yukio had the skills to take care of herself, and it's a good thing she did, because baby, that meeting went all the way left. I'm telling you, the shit hit the fan. Yukio attacked the Silver Samurai. Viper went to look for Lady Mariko because she followed the car from the apartment to the dockyard, so she knew Lady Mariko couldn't be far. And the only one left to assist them was the last X-Man standing, which is Storm. So Storm shows up at the dockyard. She gets Lady Mariko to safety. She takes Viper out, and she assists Yukio with fighting the Silver Samurai. But if you've been following the podcast, you know we've been talking about what's been going on with Storm. I would say for the previous 10 or so issues, there's been something internally going on with Storm where she's just been feeling the need to cut loose. She's always had to be so measured and maintained and calm because her emotions have a direct link to the weather. And if Storm has a bad day, baby, the entire East Coast may have a bad day. Typhoons, hurricanes, so she can't have any of that. But meeting Yukio was just the thing she needed to push her over the edge and just surrender into that feeling of wanting to let go. So she was attacking the Silver Samurai, and she was losing control of her powers because she was off internally. Then that made her connection to the elements kind of off as well. And she was actually electrocuting the Silver Samurai and killing him. And you know, Storm, she'll take a life if she has to, but it's not her preferred method. So she decided to draw all that lightning back into her. And it just went haywire. I mean, lightning bolts were flying everywhere. The warehouse was full of explosives. It just went up into a big, huge explosion. Viper was thrown into the water. Silver Samurai emerged, wounded, and Storm and Yukio were left injured and on the run in the streets of Tokyo. So, where we left off on the last episode, we see Wolverine at the hospital with Lady Mariko. She's telling him what's going on and what went down at the dockyard. The poison is pretty much out of his system at this point, and the rest of the X-Men were still in the hospital recovering. So Wolverine is like, okay, they tried to hurt you, now it's my turn to hurt them. And as soon as he's about to walk out the door, we hear the door open and a voice say, well, I'm coming with you. And it's none other than the newest X-Man herself, Rogue. And we know the X-Men aren't really happy about having Rogue as a member of the team. But Wolverine is not trying to hear that. And she's like, look, how can I prove myself as an X-Man if nobody will give me the chance to prove myself? And Wolverine agrees begrudgingly, but he tells her, look, you follow my orders every flaming step of the way. And this is where we pick up with Uncanny X-Men 173. So get your popcorn, get comfortable, get you something to drink, because baby, we're about to dive into the aftermath and part 2 of Wolverine's wedding. So as we open up the issue, we are greeted with more of this beautiful Paul Smith art. I just love the way he draws faces and bodies and expressions. He can kind of let you know where the character is, even if it's just a background character, where they are mentally, just by the expression on their face or the way he draws their body and whatever pose they're in. We see a shopping venue in Tokyo, brightly lit. There's a man and a woman. They're walking with their arms around each other. There's a lady. She's walking. She looks like she's intent on maybe getting to work or something. So it's just a very bustling, busy Tokyo day. And all of a sudden, we see 2 guys come crashing out of the window. And they hit the ground. And the caption says, you want a good time in Tokyo? The guidebook says to check out the Ginza. Occasionally, though, even the best of places, things can get a bit rowdy. So evidently, this is a really upscale neighborhood, and stuff like this really doesn't take place. And when we go to the next page, we see why it's taking place. We see a bar, and Wolverine has this guy up by the throat, and the bar is smashed. glass all over the place. And Rogue is leaned back on the bar just watching the whole scene, taking it all in and looking like she's having the time of her life, watching Wolverine interrogate this poor helpless Japanese man. And Wolverine says, "It's already been a lousy night for business, Aiko. You want me to do the same for your health? I want information and I won't ask again." And Rogue is sitting back and she's looking like, "Y'all better cooperate, sugar. We've been getting the runaround all evening and it's making Wolverine a wee bit testy." Because we know Rogue is coming off the heels of being a villain. So this is her kind of thing. She's eating it up. And so the man goes, "I dare not betray my oath of silence. It would mean my life." And Wolverine goes, "In that case, bub, you got a problem." And then we see someone creeping up behind Rogue with a knife. And she goes, "I do so enjoy watching a professional work. Playing your sidekick is proven to be a real education, Wolvie." She doesn't know this knife is coming up behind her. So the guy stabs her from behind, but because she's invulnerable, the knife really just slides right off of her. And she grabs him by the throat. And she goes, "That, sir, is no way to treat a lady." And she slams him on the ground and says, "Don't do it again." And so Wolverine pops his claws. And he goes, "You're out of options, Aiko. I want the Grand Obayun of the Yakuza, Nabaton Yakuse." Now, Nabaton Yakuse was the mediator that was at the meeting that Viper and the Silver Samurai set up. He's a crime lord, and he's one of the only crime lords that Mariko's father, Lord Shingen, spared. So they felt he would be a neutral party to sort of negotiate the conversation between Mariko and her half-brother, the Silver Samurai, in regards to who's going to have the title of leader of the clan of Yashida. And let's just say there's something shady going on with Nabaton that we're going to get to coming up. So the guy goes, "You'll never reach him, Gaijin," which is a slang for foreigner. Nabaton-san is defended by a veritable army, the finest martial artists in Nippon. Wolverine says, "That's my problem. Yours is more immediate." And he tosses the guy to the side. And he's thinking, this punk's a survivor. He talks, figuring whatever happens, he'll come out ahead. Either I'll nail the old man or vice versa. And Rogue is in the background. She goes, "What's our next move, Wolvie?" And Wolverine says, "Nabaton. He'll lead us to Viper and the Silver Samurai." And Rogue says, "And then things get nasty." And so now we switch scenes and we see a Japanese neighborhood where all the apartments are tightly packed on top of each other. And we see Yukio and Storm. And Yukio is banging on someone's door. And she goes, "Tak, it's Yukio. Open the door and let us in. My friend and I need help." And we see a man on the second floor slide the window open. And he goes, "Go away, wild one. The word's out on both of you from the Obayun himself. A death mark. Forgive me, Yukio-san. There's no sanctuary for you anywhere." So the block is hot. So the word is out that Aurora and Yukio have caused some big disturbance. The dockyard is blown up. The warehouse is in smithereens. And no one is going to help them because the word is out from the Obayun himself that these two are wanted. So they're pretty much on their own. And Yukio scrunches up her face. She goes, "Pooh, it's a long way across town to the X-Men's hospital, Storm. You up for the trip?" And Storm goes, "I fear that decision has just been taken out of our hands." And we pan back and we see a group of Japanese thugs in the alley. And Yukio, of course, gets excited because she's the wild one. She thrives on this kind of stuff. And she goes, "Ooh, 3-1 odds. Hardly seems like a fair fight, but beggars can't be choosers." And on a side note, if anyone has the comic, please check out Storm's hair. Now, Storm is usually known for her beautiful, lovely white locks that are just cascading down her shoulders and down her back. But because she drew so much of the lightning back into herself that she was using against Silver Samurai, baby, her hair is a mess. It's fried, dyed, and laid to the side. it looks like she got electrocuted. So whatever you picture, when you picture someone being electrocuted, that's what she looks like. And it is killing me. It's so funny. And so she runs her fingers through her hair. She goes, "We face death and worse. How can Yukio be so lighthearted and uncaring? We are trapped in this alley. We are unarmed, wounded, and my control over my mutant elemental powers is marginal at best." And then she goes, "Oh well, you only die once." Now we're back with Wolverine and Rogue, and we see Wolverine's thoughts. It says Nabatone's estate is outside Tokyo, rigged by computer-controlled defenses. Thanks to Rogue, bypassing them as a breeze. And we see Rogue and Wolverine flying, and she's carrying him, and they land down on the grounds of Nabatone's estate. And so they're walking around, and Wolverine tries a door, and it just slides open. And Rogue goes, "No guards?" And Wolverine says, "Doesn't look like it." And he tells her, "Stay close and stay quiet. Follow my lead." And Rogue says, "Sure enough, boss, anything you say." And he goes, "You think we're playing games, kid?" And she says, "No, sirree, I'm just not afraid of being hurt. One of the benefits of being invulnerable." And he goes, "Famous last words." And Rogue says, "My stars, Wolverine, you sound jealous." And he goes, "Someone's downstairs. Alone." And she says, "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go get this sucker." But unbeknownst to Rogue, as she's walking, she triggers a silent alarm. And Wolverine's thoughts are she doesn't see the electric eye or the robot activated by her breaking the beam. And this robot whizzes around the corner. And he goes, "I'm tempted to let her take the shot and find out what her limits really are." But then he trips Rogue and gets her on the ground just in time for this robot to fire this huge laser beam, which pulverizes this cement statue that's sitting on a display. And then Wolverine goes, "But I may need her later on." And Rogue just sees what just happened, and she just gasps. Because that could have been her. And meanwhile, she's talking all this big shit about being invulnerable, which are powers she stole from Wolverine's good friend, Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers. So he was tempted just to let that beam pulverize her just to see the limits of that invulnerability, but he did decide to save her. And so they're both on the ground, and Rogue is kind of hovering over Wolverine, and he goes, "Next time, watch your step. That statue could have been you." And Rogue is still taking this very lighthearted. She goes, "My hero, a save like that deserves a reward." And so she moves in to give him a kiss. And what is she thinking? Because anybody knows, Rogue knows she can't touch anyone because the slightest touch triggers the absorption of that person's powers and psyche. So she's just taking this as like all one big joke. And Wolverine goes, "No." And he puts his fist right up underneath her chin. Like, "If you move another millimeter, I will pop these claws and your whole head will be across the room." And he goes, "Don't ever pull a stunt like that, nor make a threat like that to me or any other X-Man, even as a joke. You understand?" And then Rogue is startled. She's laying on the ground, like clutching her pearls and grasping her throat. And she's like, I didn't mean any harm." And he goes, "That's why you're still breathing." So lesson learned, don't try that shit with Wolverine, or don't try that with any X-Man, because that's just not cool. Like, you literally are in their mind still a villain. And like Storm said in Uncanny X-Men 171, when she was protesting against Professor Xavier for even allowing Rogue on the team, she's like, how can we dare trust someone who could turn on us in a split second in battle? And stuff like this doesn't help your case, Rogue. But, Rogue is young and dumb, and she was like supposedly like 17 or 18 when she joined the X-Men. So she still has a lot of learning to go. And she's getting on the job training by Wolverine. So she won't try that again. Not with him, at least. So now we see Wolverine's thoughts. And it goes, what makes Rogue a mutant is her ability to absorb powers, memories, the total identity of whoever she touches. The slightest physical contact triggers the transfer. And while it's usually temporary, once it was permanent. Her victim was an old friend of mine. That's not easily forgotten or forgiven. So we're seeing that, each X-Man has issues with Rogue being on a team because, mind you, the last time Wolverine saw Rogue was when they were punching the hell out of each other at the Pentagon way back in Uncanny X-Men 158. And so now she shows up at his doorstep with the team for his wedding The team is down. She's the only one up and able to help him find Viper and Silver Samurai. So this is a very tense situation. It's very uneasy, and there's not a lot of trust there, with good reason. So as they're searching the estate, they come across this meditation room, and Wolverine goes bingo, and he sees Nabatone sitting at a table, a traditional Japanese table. You know, it's low to the ground, and he's sitting there on his knees. And Rogue is standing at the door, and she goes, "Wolverine, what's that smell?" And Wolverine goes, "Decay. Our esteemed crime lord Nabatone Yakuse joined his ancestors over a week ago. Don't come any closer, kid. He isn't very pretty." And then she goes, "But didn't Lady Mariko say she's seen Mr. Nabatone earlier tonight? That he helped arrange a meeting? How could he do that if he was dead?" Okay, that's the $1 million question. How could he do that if he was dead? Wolverine just said he'd been dead for over a week. This man sitting in his house with his legs crossed, sitting at the table, deader than a doornail. But he was at that meeting earlier tonight. The mysteries continue to evolve. But don't worry, by the end of this episode, all will be revealed. And so Wolverine immediately turns around and he goes, "An imposter. We've been suckered. While we're out in the boondocks chasing smoke, the samurai has a clear shot at Mariko and the X-Men." So literally, they were just running all over the city looking for Nabatone because they figured, okay, he was at this meeting. He could tell us where the Viper and Silver Samurai are. Meanwhile, Nabatone, well, the real Nabatone anyway, been dead down to the house for over a week. So who was at that meeting? So now that means Mariko and the X-Men are completely unguarded. Well, not completely unguarded because Mariko does have her security at the hospital guarding the floor that they're on, but they're no match for Viper and the Silver Samurai. So Wolverine just realized that, and now him and Rogue got to get back to that hospital to see what's going on. But then we cut scenes and we're back in the alleyway where Storm and Yukio are giving these Japanese thugs hell. I mean, that's one alleyway I bet they wish they never walked into that night. And so we see Storm frying one of the guys with lightning. And then Yukio kicks one of them in the face. And she goes, "Nifty, Wind Rider. If that bolt of lightning doesn't teach these lowlifes the error of their ways, nothing will." And so Storm is standing over the guy she just hit with the lightning, and her fists are all glowing and smoking. And she goes, "I have never used my powers to deliberately inflict pain." And Yukio goes, "It's no less than what they deserve, and a far gentler fate than they had in store for us." And Storm looks at her at the corner of her eye, and Yukio goes, "Look on the bright side. After tonight, they'll probably think twice about going out in the rain, much less mugging anyone." And then Storm throws her head back in laughter and she says, "You know what? I think you're right. Whatever it means, this madness of yours that has infected me, I welcome it." And she shoots this huge lightning bolt up to the sky. And that's the last we see of the Storm that so many people had come to know and love. Because when she makes her next appearance in this issue, baby, you better hold on to your seat. So the next scene we see is the hospital. And we see Mariko's security team. I mean, they look real cool. They got on all black suits, black shades. They got their guns in their jackets. And so they're guarding the floor where the X-Men are recuperating from Viper's poison. And so Wolverine's thoughts are, try as we might to reach the hospital in time, I have a nasty feeling we'll be too late. And as soon as he has that thought, we see these shuriken come just whizzing down the hallway and hitting the security team and taking them out. And then we see Viper with ninjas from the hand, and she tells them, "Be quick, be efficient. I want no witnesses and no survivors." But before they can even take another step, we see Rogue flying at top speed come whizzing down the hallway. And she tackles the entire crew. And then busts through a window and drops them all from stories above the ground and goes, "Happy landings."
Bye.
And Viper, the ninjas from the hand, they're all falling through the air. But of course, because they're ninjas, they do land on their feet. And Viper goes, she's only a girl. Despite her powers, while you remain the deadliest assassins in Japan, kill her. And they go, as you command, Viper. And Viper says, splendid. They should keep the brat busy long enough for me to find the Silver Samurai and finish what we came here to do. And so now we get back to the interior of the hospital and we see Wolverine walking through the hallway. And he goes, there's just me and you left up here, Samurai. Show yourself, if you dare. And we see the Silver Samurai walking around the corner in front of the huge hole Rogue just busted in the wall. And he goes, you will not find me lacking in courage, Gaijin. And Wolverine says, do tell. Is that why you bought an army? And he says, I need no help to claim my birthright, dog, or to deal with you. And he lunges at Wolverine with his energy sword. And the captions say Harada's energy sword can cut through almost anything, or so he believes. And Wolverine says, my claws are forged with pure adamantium, the strongest metal known to man. And so Harada's energy sword clashes with Logan's claws. And Wolverine says, my skeleton is a near unbreakable mix of adamantium and bone. I survive his first cut. And he survives mine. And I'm telling y'all, for these next 2.5 pages, there's no dialogue. It's nothing but a fight scene. And again, I have to mention this beautiful Paul Smith art. I mean, there's no dialogue. It's just Logan and the Silver Samurai fighting against this red backdrop. So the colorist did an amazing job as well. I mean, if you have the issue, just please check it out. Or if you can Google the images, it's just an amazing scene. Amazing 2.5 pages of just beautiful art, amazing color, and violence. And we see the Silver Samurai stab Wolverine. Wolverine does a back kick, turns around and faces Silver Samurai and slashes his mask halfway off his face. And then the Silver Samurai, with half his mask torn away, puts Logan in a headlock. And while he has Logan in a headlock, he takes his energy sword and stabs Logan right through the abdomen. And the look on Wolverine's face, I mean, his eyes, even through his mask, are just like wide. You can see the pain on his face. And Wolverine falls to the ground. And the Silver Samurai turns around and then stabs Logan again straight through the neck. And Logan somehow manages to grab Silver Samurai's arm, blocking his next shot. And he takes his arm and snaps it right in half. And so he smacks Silver Samurai across the face with his claws. And his whole mask flies off. And Wolverine is about to stab him through the neck because now his whole mask is off. He has no armor. And here comes Mariko grabbing his arm. She says, "Aye, Logan-san, no. Enough blood has been spilled, beloved. Let this be an end to it. My half-brother has lost. Grant him his life." And Wolverine goes, "If I do that, Miko, this'll never be over. He'll keep coming back till one of you is dead." And I told y'all way back in the first episode of the Messy Mutant Tea Podcast, when Carol Danvers had a chance to take Mystique off the board in Uncanny X-Men 158, oh, I'm not letting you walk away. If we got beef and I have a chance to take you out, this is going to end right here. So I'm with Logan on this one. But that is not even an issue because next thing we know, Viper pops up. And she's standing again in front of this huge hole that Rogue ripped in the middle of the building. And she goes, "Have no fear, Wolverine. Your dilemma is about to be resolved. Stand away from Samurai and no false moves or I'll fire." And she's holding a gun, pointing it straight at Mariko. And Wolverine's thoughts are, she'll fire anyway as soon as Harada's clear. But for now, I play things her way. No real alternative in the shape I'm in. Viper could cut me down long before I reach her. Instead, I edge Mariko towards the door, figuring to shove her through the safety if Viper gives me half a chance. There's no sign or sound of Rogue. Dumb kid. Probably got overconfident again and got herself nailed. And so the Silver Samurai is easing up to his feet. And he's in bad shape. And he's stumbling and mumbling. And he's like, Viper, mistress, forgive your humble servant. And then he falls and hits the floor. And then Viper goes, Yukio. And then Wolverine's thoughts are, we move as one. Viper and I, me for the door and her for her gun. The outcome isn't even close. And Viper fires. And then we see Rogue come flying at super speed through that same hole she busted in the wall. And she says, take a hike, shorty. Let me do my good deed for the day. And she shoves Wolverine and Mariko through the double doors to safety. And Wolverine's thoughts are, the kid's either a show-off or she doesn't know her own strength. That shove flaming near puts me and Mariko into orbit. And then Viper goes, a noble gesture, X-Man. I sure hope your compeers appreciate your sacrifice. And Rogue goes, the joke's on you, lady. They couldn't care less whether I live or die. Aw. Well, that'll change soon, Rogue, because you got to get, look, you got to prove yourself, and this is definitely a way to do it, but that made me feel bad when I read it all. And then Rogue thinks that blaster must be something else. I can actually feel its effect, but I gotta keep blocking Viper's shot no matter what. Lady Mariko was kind to me. She accepted me right off, and I won't let any harm come to her. And that is true. Lady Mariko was the first person just to blindly show Rogue kindness. If you guys remember on the last episode where we looked at Uncanny X-Men 172 and they all arrived for Wolverine's wedding, everyone was happy to see each other and celebrating. And Rogue was kind of just standing back. She actually was waiting in the Genkin, which is like a foyer. She wouldn't even come into the room with everyone else. And Lady Mariko goes to Wolverine and says, Logan-san, one of your guests remains in the Genkin. Won't you invite her in? And Logan's thoughts were, I'd rather cut her heart out. And then he goes into the whole spiel of how he knows Rogue and how the last time he saw her, they were fighting at the Pentagon. But Lady Mariko ignored all of that. And she went up to Rogue and grabbed her hand. Of course, Rogue had her gloves on, so there was no skin-to-skin contact. And she just grabbed Rogue by the hand and says, welcome, Rogue son. I hope your stay with us will be a lovely one. And that meant a lot to Rogue because, it's a long flight from New York to Japan, and the X-Men were not really thrilled about having her on the team. So I can only imagine how tense that flight was. I mentioned that in the last episode. So she's tired and jet lagged and probably hungry and like, thank God somebody's offering me some kindness, something to drink, a little bite to eat, a place to lay my head, so that really meant a lot to her. So Rogue is going to do whatever she has to just to keep Lady Mariko safe. And this blaster, whatever kind of ray that's coming out of this gun is really affecting Rogue. And it's even taking her by surprise because, again, she got that invulnerability from Miss Marvel. So not too many things hurt Rogue, but this one's actually taking a toll on her. So Wolverine busts through the double doors and he goes, Rogue. And he's like, his thoughts are, I'm moving like an old man, no speed and less strength, looking desperately for a gun, a knife, or anything I can use as a weapon to stop Viper. When her own blaster overloads and does the job for me. So Viper's gun is shooting out so much energy, it just overloads and explodes in her face. And Rogue falls into Wolverine's arms. He goes, the kid's barely breathing, but I can find a pulse. And Rogue goes, gee, Wolvie, I guess I ain't as invulnerable as I thought. And she's out of it. Like, she's going through it. And so Viper goes, it seems like we part even, X-Men, both sides with casualties. This is Harada's fight. It will be his decision whether or not to continue. And then Logan goes, I see either of you again, lady. I guarantee it'll be the last time. And Viper goes, perhaps. Farewell. And she activates her teleport ring and teleports her and the Silver Samurai to safety. And so Logan is there cradling Rogue in his arms, and his thoughts are, and Rogue and I are now alone in the room. And he's looking at her and she's in bad shape and she goes, so much for my brilliant career. And I think my life. And he goes, don't talk stupid. My healing factor can save you. And Rogue goes, no, you need that to save yourself. If I absorb your powers, Wolverine, you may die. And Wolverine goes, my risk. Sighs, darling, who's going to stop me? And he says, I'm a man who pays his debts, Rogue. You sacrificed yourself for Mariko. It's only fair I return the compliment. and he bends down and he kisses her, transferring his powers, his memories, and his healing factor to Rogue so she can recover. So this mission, Uncanny X-Men 173, was definitely the first bonding moment for Wolverine and Rogue. Hell, it was the first moment that they weren't punching the hell out of each other as enemies. So to come this far at the end of this arc, where he trusts her enough to give his healing factor to her when he's injured himself, really says a lot about Wolverine. I mean, when we started the previous episode and we were just going through some of the things that Wolverine's teammates love about him, it's because he's extremely honorable. He's extremely loyal. He cares about friendship. And the fact that Rogue sacrificed herself without a thought to save him and Mariko really showed him a different side of her. So this is just, of course, the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Wolverine and Rogue are, probably two of the closest X-Men. They love each other. They've been on numerous adventures. They're great friends, and I love their relationship. So it was really nice to see how it all started, because he went a long way from wanting to cut her heart out when she showed up at his doorstep to making the sacrifice to give her his healing factor after she saved Mariko. So that was a nice way to wrap up the action in this arc. And so now, finally, Jesus, after trauma and turmoil and aches and pains and bumps and bruises, and we're finally making it to the wedding day. Sheesh, it seemed like we would never get here. So, can't forget we did come to Japan for a wedding. So now it's finally Wolverine and Mariko's wedding day. And let's just say that holds a bit of drama of its own. So let's take a look. So the next page we see is a beautiful, peaceful scene. It's a tranquil lake, a nice garden, beautiful temples. The sky is clear and blue. And it goes, the ancestral seat of Clan Yashida in Miyagi Prefecture, some 300 kilometers north of Tokyo, nestled in the hills overlooking the port city of Aragashima. And this is a week later, after all the action has taken place, and I guess things have settled down. So Mariko is walking through the garden, looking beautiful as ever, and she is talking to this huge statue of Buddha. And she goes, I'm as giddy as a schoolgirl, too excited to sleep. Do all brides feel so on the eve of their wedding? All is in readiness, yet I'm certain something essential has been forgotten. And then she hears someone, and she turns around, she goes, who's there? And a man is approaching her, but we just see like the bottom half of his body, and he's dressed in this petticoat, like clothes from a certain time period, looking real fancy and suspicious. And he looks into her eyes, and we see a close-up of his eyes and Mariko's eyes, and he just goes, a friend, Lady Mariko, who wishes you and your consort well. And he just walks off. And Mariko is left standing there looking dazed. And then she kind of snaps out of it. And she goes, goodness, what happened to me? I must be more distracted than I thought. Imagine talking to myself like that. So whatever this man did to her, she don't even remember he was there. So what's going on with that? And then on the next page, we see Wolverine's thoughts, and everyone is at the venue, a beautiful temple for the wedding. And Wolverine's thoughts are, this should be the happiest day of my life, but I can't shake a feeling of unease. The air seems supercharged, like it gets just before a big storm cuts loose. Oh, baby, a big storm about to cut loose, but not in the way that you think. There's been no sign of Samurai or Viper since our last scrap in Tokyo. Be just like him to show up in the middle of the ceremony. I'll feel better when this is over. And so he's all on edge, which of course, how can he not be with all the things they've been through since announcing this wedding, and even before the wedding, all the stuff he went through with Mariko's father. I guess once the wedding is over and the deal is sealed, he can just breathe. So everyone's starting to arrive, and the X-Men that were poisoned are out of the hospital. We see Colossus, Professor Xavier, Kitty, Nightcrawler. Rogue is in a wheelchair, so Viper's blast really did her in. So Kitty's pushing her wheelchair, and we see Lilandra, Professor Xavier's boo. And so Colossus goes, "It is good to be out of the hospital, Tavares." And Rogue goes, "You can say that again, Colossus. More guests are arriving, people." And so we see Lorna Dane, which is Polaris. We see Scott's father, Corsair, and his brother, Alex. They've all arrived. And then we see Scott come in with Madeline. And the caption just reads, "Lorna Dane, plus the Summers clan, Alex, his father, Christopher, and his big brother, Scott, Aurora's predecessor as leader of the X-Men." And he goes, "I'd like to introduce a very special friend, Madeline Pryor." And Madeline's there. She's looking good. She got on her yellow and her pearl. She's dressed to kill. But this is why I say the X-Men are so messy. Like, Scott Summers did not think to warn his friends, "Hey, I'm dating a woman who looks just like Jean Grey. You know, the woman we all loved who tried to kill us once she turned into Dark Phoenix." And all the stuff they went through with Jean, you would just think he would mention that before popping up at Wolverine's wedding or anywhere around the X-Men, because hello, you don't think they're going to freak out a bit? And of course, Lilandra is the first one to freak out because, I mean, you guys can look into the backstory. Phoenix almost brought down her whole empire. And she just goes, "Shara and Katheri, have mercy." And she grabs her energy sword. And Professor Xavier goes, "Colossus, stop her." And Colossus goes, "Empress Lilandra, what are you doing?" And Lilandra goes, "Are you blind? Look at her. She's the evil one reborn." And Professor Xavier goes, "She is not. She resembles Jean Grey, but that is all. Phoenix is dead." And Lilandra calms down. She goes, "Charles, Scott, forgive me for when I saw her, my reaction was automatic. I could not help myself." Baby, Lilandra was about to take Madeline's head off. I mean, you know, hello. I mean, the X-Men are so messy. And Alex had met Madeline. Yeah, Alex didn't think to mention this to anybody. Like, hey, heads up. He's bringing another redhead to the party. So messy. And so Scott just goes, "I understand, Lilandra. No harm." And he drops his head. And Madeline is looking like, what the fuck? Like, what? Like, he didn't even turn around. He didn't even explain it to her. Well, of course, he can't really explain it to her because I think at this point he had already showed her like a picture of Jean. He just straight out asked her, "Are you Jean Grey?" And she punched the hell out of him. So either that's already happened or it's about to happen in some of the issues that we're going to look at going forward. But damn, Scott, so messy. But that's my boy, though. So Madeline's just standing there like, should I go wait in the car? And Scott's thoughts are, "But I wish I could be as certain as you are, Professor, that Madeline isn't Jean reincarnated." So he's still got his own issues that he's going through with this. And anyone who's an Uncanny X-Men fan knows, particularly of this time period, or even if you've Googled or done any research, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So then Kitty goes, "Look up in the sky," and we see Storm flying in the distance. She goes, "It's Storm?" And this is the part I have been waiting for. Ever since I decided to do a podcast, and I knew I wanted to do it on the Uncanny X-Men Claremont run, because that is, again, like I said, the run that's the most special to me. It's the one I grew up with. It just really means a lot to me. And let's face it, it's one of the best, because Chris Claremont wrote the X-Men, baby, like the rent was due, which I'm sure back then it was. So we just got fed so well with such rich stories and rich characters and inner monologues and thought bubbles, and we got really, really good writing and really, really, really fleshed out characters. We knew so much about these characters that it just felt so personal. So when I knew I wanted to do this run, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to start. For me, a good starting place would be Uncanny X-Men 171, when Rogue joins the team. Because I talked about this in the first episode of the podcast. I grew up in a very small town. And so the only way I would get my comics is I would go to like the local corner store. My dad would take me every weekend, and they had a comic book rack, the little spindle rack that turns around, and I would get current issues of the X-Men, but I had really no idea kind of the backstory of any of this. And I would get like, this was like Uncanny X-Men 210, like around the Mutant Massacre is when I really started collecting X-Men comics as a kid. And so years later, my mom and I moved to a bigger area, and I stumbled across a comic book store, and I started getting back issues. And I remember Uncanny X-Men 171 being one of the first back issues that I bought, because I loved Rogue. I still do. And I just was like, oh my God, like Rogue was a villain? Like, why are the X-Men chasing her? And I just remember standing there looking at that cover, like being mesmerized. So I felt like that would be a good starting point for me to do this podcast, and start from 171. And when I did, this was one of the moments that I have been waiting for, because I love Storm, but this is my favorite version of Storm. And you can throw tomatoes at me if you want to. I know this divides a lot of the Storm fandom. And don't get me wrong, I'm in love with all versions of Storm, but this one is special to me. So Kitty goes, look up in the sky. It's Storm? And we see Colossus, Professor Xavier, and Kitty standing there with their mouths open, like gagged. And we see Storm come flying down, and baby, Storm has completely transformed her look. And any X-Men fan knows what we are about to get into. Baby, she is standing there in skin-tight leather pants, leather boots. She got on her belt. She has on a choker with studs on it. She got on a leather jacket, leather gloves, looking like a badass. And she has chopped off all her long, beautiful white hair. And baby, she is sporting a mohawk. Whoa! This is the introduction of Mohawk Storm. Which I love. Hate me if you want to, throw tomatoes, leave horrible comments, I don't care. Mohawk Storm is my girl. To be more specific, Powerless Mohawk Storm is my favorite, just because of the way Claremont wrote her. Like, we talked about this on the previous episodes of the podcast, and we've talked about, this change, this storm, to excuse the pun, that was brewing inside of Aurora. She's always had to be so measured and calm and in control, and she just was yearning to break free. And we were seeing evidence of that along the way, where she got into the fight with Callisto and stabbed her through the heart. Like some of the usage of her powers, the way she had decided to use her powers, she just was becoming more and more unhinged, because she was wanting to let go. She had never been able to express that side of her. And coming to Tokyo, her adventure with Yukio, the way Yukio, the wild one, was just so in love with life and, flirting with danger, dancing with death. The higher the stakes, the more Yukio loved it. Storm looked at that like, damn, I have never been able to be that girl. And this is Storm being that girl. And this is such a pivotal moment for Storm. Issue 172 and 173, her time in Japan, her time with Yukio, her friendship with Yukio, has always been a part of who Storm is from this point going forward. Like, these comics came out in the 80s. So in the 40 plus years since, this has always been very special to Storm. Storm's friendship with Yukio has always been very special to her. Like, Yukio pops up many times throughout the years. That's why when she was introduced in the Wolverine series from 1982 with Frank Miller and Chris Claremont, I said we get introduced to a lifelong friend of the X-Men, because Storm and Yukio, that's one of her closest relationships. And so these issues are really, really huge and really, really important for Storm going forward in the 40 plus years. This is where it starts. And I love it. I love Powerless Mohawk Storm because her powers were this is not Powerless Storm. She clearly still has her powers. We haven't even gotten to the point where she's lost them yet. But the reason I love that version is because Claremont wrote her so beautifully. I mean, Storm and her powers are one, because she's had to be so in tune with her emotions, and her emotions, affect the powers. Her powers affect the weather, which affects everyone. So Storm has always had to be so in tune with that part of her, that mutant part of her. Like, she has never been able to just forget that. She's had to hone it and master it. And it's such a huge part of her. She's the wind rider. She's the goddess. Like, it's such a huge part of her personality. So for that to be taken away, which any X-Men fan knows how it was taken away, but we'll get into that, in future episodes. For her to find just the will to live, much less live and continue to lead the X-Men fearlessly, was such a journey, such a beautiful journey. If anyone knows the comic Life Death, which we will get to, the first page of that comic is just heartbreaking. It's just Storm laying there, and the look in her eyes is just like, we've all been there to some degree. Like, you feel that panel, and it's just like to see her build herself back up and find the confidence and find the purpose. And, it's something she always wrestled with, from there on out, because powerless Mohawk Storm led the X-Men through some very dark times. And so, and the image that comes into my mind is the cover of Uncanny X-Men 215 when she's fighting Super Saber and Stonewall and Crimson Commando, and she's kicking, and she's like, she was still a badass, and she was still kicking ass and taking names even without her powers. So the way Claremont wrote her, it just really made me fall in love with Storm that much more. So that is why I love the powerless Mohawk version of Storm. But this one right here, hey, I got half of it. I got the Mohawk, but she still has her powers at this point. So she's standing there, posed, like, check me out. How you like me now? And Kitty loses it. Kitty goes, your hair, your clothes, what have you done? And Storm goes, a new look. Do you like it? And Kitty just loses it. She goes, how could you? And just runs off. And Storm goes, Kitty. And Cyclops goes, it's a rather striking change, Aurora. Why'd you do it? And she turns around. She has her back to Scott. So she turns around. She goes, I had my reason, Scott. Am I not allowed? Goddess. And she sees Madeline and kind of freaks out. Again, Scott didn't warn anyone that my current girlfriend looks just like our deceased teammate who tried to kill us. And so Storm goes, I beg your pardon. I did not mean. And Cyclops goes, my fault. I should have realized the effect Madeline would have on everyone and warned you beforehand. You think so, Slim? Oh, now you're getting that revelation? And Madeline goes, don't feel badly, Aurora. I'm getting used to being stared at. That's why I love Madeline. Again, this is the time frame I came into comics. And when I came into comics and started collecting Uncanny X-Men, Jean was dead. I didn't learn about Jean until back issues, and then when X Factor came out, I started actually reading, the character Jean Grey. So Madeline is the one I knew Scott with first. And I always have loved Madeline. She's so spunky and fiery. Excuse the pun, fiery. And she just has her own personality, and she ain't take no shit from nobody. And she just accepted the X-Men, accepted Scott's world. She just was like, I get it. She just was like a ride or die. And, I have feelings about what happened to Madeline and her character arc over the next, 35, 40 years and how that's developed. But I'll get into all of that the more we get into that story. But so right now, Storm is the talk of the wedding. She has showed up, baby, and she has gagged the entire wedding party. Kitty done ran off. Scott is like, oh my God, like, what is going on with Aurora? But you know what? Welcome to the 80s, baby. Cause she, that punk look was in back then, she got on her spikes, and I just love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So the next panel goes a little later. Everyone is sitting down at this beautiful dinner. We see Lilandra and the professor sitting together. Scott and Madeline are sitting together. Nightcrawler and Kitty are talking. Colossus is standing there. And Storm, she's changed her clothes. She's in her traditional kimono with her mohawk just blowing in the breeze. And she's just standing there. And so Lilandra goes over to the professor. She whispers to him, I'm ashamed of my reaction. Madeline seems like a lovely child, and she and Scott look very happy together. But I was amazed at Aurora. And he goes, I too. Is this some whim or indicative of some deeper, more serious metamorphosis? So they at the wedding gossiping about Storm. I told you she the talk of the town. And Kitty walks in, she goes over to Nightcrawler, and she's wearing this jet black traditional Japanese wig, and she's dressed in a kimono, and Nightcrawler goes, looking good, Catchden, and she goes, oh, hush, fuzzy elf, and she giggles. So apparently she's gotten over her little temper tantrum. But I was doing some reading, and, Kitty's a teenager. She's like 13 at this point, and she's new to this world. And I get why she reacted so strongly, because I think not too long before this, her parents had gotten divorced. And so that kind of threw her into a tailspin. And she always looked at Aurora as that mother figure. Like when Professor Xavier first went to recruit Kitty, Aurora took her to the ice cream shop, and she just was that mother figure, that stability, that port in the storm, to excuse another pun, that she could depend on. And to see her like this wild side of her just really threw Kitty into a teenage meltdown. So, I get it. And this next interaction is really cute. So Kitty goes over to Madeline, and Kitty's holding a bundle. We know it's Lockheed, but he's wrapped up in like a bundle and he's sleeping. And Lockheed, for anyone who doesn't know, is Kitty's pet dragon. Yes, dragon. And so Kitty goes over to Madeline. She goes, hi, I'm Kitty Pryde. You Scott's girlfriend? And Madeline goes, but weren't you a brunette a while ago? And Kitty goes, it's a wig. I'm acting as Miko for the ceremony, the priest's female assistant, kind of like a maid of honor. And she goes, could you do me a big favor and keep an eye on Lockheed? He shouldn't be a bother. He's snoozing. And Madeline goes, no problem. It'll be my pleasure. And Kitty goes, great. See you later. And Madeline's thinking, she goes, nice kid. I wish I had a sister like her. And being a pilot, I think Lockheed's a perfect name for her pet. And she opens up the bundle and she goes, cat? And she sees a sleeping Lockheed, again, a dragon, just snoozing away. And she is like, what the hell? And so she's sitting beside Scott, and Scott is, making some small talk with the professor. And he goes, wait till you meet my grandparents, professor. You've all got to come to Alaska. And Madeline just looks up with this blank look on her face. She goes, Scott? And he goes, yes, Madeline. And she's staring straight ahead, and she grabs him by his tie and pulls him over. And he goes, something the matter? And she goes, just precisely who are these people and what the blazes have you gotten me into? Oh, baby, buckle your seatbelt, Miss Madeline, because you ain't seen nothing yet. Oh, I feel so bad. Like, I love Madeline as a character, and seeing her here so fresh and new and just innocent and... Ugh, Scott Summers, you ain't shit. But anyway, we'll get into that another day. So now we see the actual ceremony. And Logan's thoughts are, in deference to Mariko, this is a Shinzen Kanishite traditional Shinto wedding. Me, I couldn't care less. If we work out, it won't be because there was a big ceremony or a slip of official paper. And if we don't, they won't keep us together. Our love is what counts. The rest is just decoration. And Mariko's coming down the aisle. She, of course, looks beautiful. She has a red and yellow kimono and a white under kimono. Her hair is all done up with Japanese flowers. She just looks beautiful. And he goes, love. Words sound strange coming from me. Not my style at all. So I'll change. Everyone does. Mariko's beauty takes my breath away. As I follow her to the altar where we'll take our vows, her under kimono's white for mourning, signifying her symbolic death as she leaves her parents' family and joins herself forever to me and mine. So Mariko gets to the front of the altar with Wolverine, and she goes, stop the ceremony. Most Imperial Majesty honored guest, there will be no wedding. What? And so Wolverine goes, why? And she goes, because gaijin, again, which is a slang term, a derogatory slang term for foreigner. She goes, because gaijin, you are not worthy. And then she turns her back to him, and the guests are gagging. They like, no, we done came all this way. And you, what? And so there's not another word spoken between them. This last page is nothing but pictures. There's no dialogue. Mariko's back is to Wolverine, and she just walks out of the venue. And she walks out into the hallway, and baby, there's that same mysterious stranger that was with her in the garden. He's standing there in his period costume, smoking a cigarette with a smile on his face. And so the X-Men, they get up, and Scott and Madeline and everybody just leave the venue. And, Scott and Aurora and Nightcrawler, as they're leaving, they're the three that are looking back because they really, they care about Wolverine and they know he's heartbroken. And we just see Wolverine's face with a tear coming down. Okay, so I guess we have some splaining to do. So buckle up your seatbelts, refill your drinks, because this is where the tea gets exceptionally messy. So who is this stranger? I mean, we knew that Viper and the Silver Samurai had it out to crash Wolverine's wedding. Well, hell, they had it out to kill Wolverine, Mariko, and the whole team. So we knew that they were the enemies. But there was somebody lurking in the background the entire time that had the goal not to kill Wolverine, but to break his heart and torment him forever going forward. So who could that be? Now, my buddy Terrence, who inspired this podcast and who was on the first episode with me, he doesn't really know the backstory of X-Men, like I do or some other X-Men fans. So he was like, maybe it's Mystique. And that I feel like Mystique is a low down, dirty, messy blue heifer. But this time, this wasn't her. This was none other than the dastardly, evil, low-down, scheming Jason Weingard, a.k.a. Mastermind. And for any of you all who don't know, Mastermind was an original member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He is an extremely powerful illusionist. He can create these realistic psionic illusions that affect all of your five senses. He can cause others to see, hear, touch, smell, and taste things that aren't even there. Like, you get completely wrapped up in his illusions. Even if you know it's an illusion, you just can't break out of it because it's so real. So he's very powerful. And he was also a member of the Hellfire Club. And so why would Mastermind want to ruin Wolverine's wedding? What's going on there? Well, let's take a trip back into time. So this goes back, way back, to Uncanny X-Men around issue 125, where Jean was still alive. So Mastermind's whole plan was, I'm trying to get in good with the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club is the elite. Sebastian Shaw, my girl Emma Frost, Harry Leland. There was just it's just the aristocracy of underground mutants who are evil and want to rule the world. The definition of opulence and, just decadence. And so Mastermind wanted to move up the ranks. He was in the Hellfire Club, but he wanted a better position. He wanted more power, more respect. He actually wanted Sebastian Shaw's title, which is the Black King, and he was scheming to get it. So he was trying to claw his way to the top. And he was like, I know a way that I can get more respect in this organization. I know a way I can get more power. I can start to penetrate Jean Grey's mind and use Jean Grey to attack the X-Men, allowing the Hellfire Club to defeat them. And baby, after that, they gonna have to look at me like, okay, all right, we see you, Mastermind. Okay, we recognize what you bring to the table, homeboy. So this goes all the way back to around issue 125 of Uncanny X-Men, where Mastermind started to tamper with Jean Grey's mind. And so he can just create illusions. But Emma Frost, now she was a baddie back in the day, and she's still a baddie, just in a different way. So she created this device that amplified his powers and allowed him to get into your mind and create illusions from hundreds and thousands of miles away. So he don't even have to be in your vicinity to mess with your mind. And his target was Jean. So he started taking Jean and her mind back in time, like 200 years, making her think she was aristocracy and she was married to him, the handsome and suave Jason Weingard. And if anybody takes a minute to Google Mastermind, you know this man look anything but handsome, brave, daring, and suave. He looks a mess. So he looks like a villain, like a homeless villain. So he created this whole illusion in Jean's mind that they were 200 years back in time. He was her lover. They were married. She would do anything for him. And she was the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club back then. And so there was this whole fantasy going on in Jean's mind that she could not tell from reality. And there would be times mid-battle that Mastermind would strike, whether he was near or far, and Jean would be mid-battle and just be taken back 200 years. Like, what? And then she would snap out of it like, where am I? And it got to a point that she had to tell Scott, because she just was like, I mean, I'm having these time slips. And they had not too long ago done a battle with Proteus, which Proteus can control reality. So she thought that there was some after effects, you know, from the battle with Proteus, like causing her to have these time slips. But it got to such a point where, like, it would really affect her, and she would just mid-battle just be off in La La Land, like this whole make-believe world that Jason Weingard has set up for her. And so it got to a breaking point, and I'm not going to go into these issues too much, because if I do, we will be here all day, because I want you all to know the entire backstory. And when it comes to X-Men, I can keep going and going and going and going. But it all came to a head in Uncanny X-Men 132, where the X-Men attended a Hellfire Gala at the Hellfire Club. And they went to investigate Emma Frost, because baby Emma had been causing a ruckus. It started way back in Uncanny X-Men 129, where Professor Xavier got a ping on Cerebro for 2 new mutants. One was in Chicago, which ended up to be Kitty Pryde. The other was in New York, which ended up to be my girl Dazzler. And so he sent one half of the team, which was Colossus, Storm, and Wolverine, along with himself, to Chicago to check out Kitty Pryde. And I mean, they didn't know who it was at the time. They just knew it was a new mutant. And he sent Jean, Scott, and Nightcrawler to New York to investigate the other new mutant, which was Dazzler. So by the time the X-Men got to Kitty Pryde's house, Emma Frost had already been there trying to recruit her for the Massachusetts Academy. So the X-Men were like, well, who is this lady? Like, how does she even know about this new mutant the same time we did? So Storm, Colossus, and Wolverine took Kitty out to the ice cream shop, while Professor Xavier stayed back to talk to her parents about having her come to the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. And while they were at the ice cream shop, they got attacked by these armored goons. So the X-Men took the goons out, but as soon as they thought they had won the battle, Emma Frost stepped in and knocked all of them out with a psionic blast. And so she kidnapped Colossus, Storm, and Wolverine and sent the goons to get Xavier too. But Kitty, actually, who was in hiding, she followed them. So she followed the X-Men to Emma's, headquarters where they were being kept. And in the meantime, Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler went into the city to check out the mutant that had emerged there. And so, of course, it was Dazzler. So they ended up in a nightclub because they had a mini Cerebro. And it was so funny because they were being real judgy. They were like, what kind of mutant are we going to find here? Because it was, a seedy nightclub. And so, but in that nightclub, Jason Weingard actually approached Jean, because he had been following her and, like I said, tampering with her mind. So he, grabbed her, and immediately she was transformed into the Jean Grey of 200 years ago. And this time, in the middle of the club, she saw it as their wedding. And so to her, in her mind, she was marrying Jason Weingard. She grabbed him and she kissed him. And Scott is standing there like, what kind of psychedelic drugs are in the air in this nightclub? Because you are tripping. But Jean couldn't tell it from reality. And so she finally kind of broke out of it, and Jason went on his way, and Jean goes, oh my God, Scott, I can explain. It was these time slips I'm having. So he looking at her like, okay, yeah, right. And then Dazzler comes on the stage and does what she does. She dazzled everyone. And so Kitty ended up getting in touch with Nightcrawler in New York saying, hey, we've been kidnapped. We need help. And so the X-Men from New York, Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler went to Chicago. They ended up saving the X-Men, rescuing them from the White Queen, Emma Frost. Jean and Emma had this huge psychic battle, and Jean won and kind of knocked Emma down a few pegs and embarrassed her and just like obliterated her. So Emma was pissed too. So of course she was willing to go in with Mastermind on this plan to infiltrate Jean's mind. So that's why they were at the Hellfire Club that night at the party, because they were trying to find a connection between Emma Frost, the Hellfire Club, and how Emma is knowing about these new mutants and just exactly what their plan is for the X-Men. Jean and Scott went in, and then Storm and Colossus went in, and Wolverine, if anybody can, picture that iconic image of Wolverine coming up through the sewers, that image comes from those issues because his job was to infiltrate the club from underground. And so as soon as Jason Weingart saw Jean, well, her and Cyclops were dancing. She had on this very nice, revealing black dress. I mean, the yitties were out and she was getting it. She was looking good. And he just came right up and swooped her right away from Cyclops. Didn't say, excuse me, may I cut in? May I have this dance? Or nothing. He just infiltrated her mind, and as soon as he grabbed her waist and turned her around into that next spin, baby, she was back 200 years ago in the arms of what she thought was her husband, Jason Weingart. So he had Jean's mind really in the palm of his hands. And Cyclops is like, what? And so he's like, Jean, like, hello? She ain't paying him no mind. All she could see is Jason Weingart and this period from 200 years ago, and she's dressed like, the time frame, and she's just completely enamored with this fantasy. So he leads her upstairs, and Cyclops was like, well, now wait a minute, you might cut in and I ain't gonna say nothing, but you ain't gonna take my woman upstairs. Like, well, we need to see what the problem is. So he goes to chase them, and all of a sudden Jason looks back and he lets the illusion slip, and Cyclops goes mastermind. And so he's like, oh, okay, this is Mastermind messing with Jean's mind. So, of course, he chases them to the top of the stairs. But as soon as he gets to the top of the stairs, he's blasted. And it's Jean in her Black Queen costume from the Hellfire Club. And Jean has completely given into this fantasy. I mean, in her mind, she is back 200 years ago. She sees the X-Men and everyone around her back in that time frame dressed in those type of clothes. She is married to her husband, Jason Weingart. There's nothing she wants more than to please him other than kill the X-Men. So his plan worked. I mean, baby, he was playing the long game. And so Peter and Aurora hear the commotion and they jump into battle. And when I tell you what proceeds is one of, I would say, the top 10 X-Men battles, because the Hellfire Club is not to be played with. They are one of my top 5 X-Men villains, and especially later once they added new members like Selene, the Black Queen. Like, I love her. Like, she's a sexy vampire who will just drain your life force, and she can control inanimate objects. But trust me, more on her later. But in this version of the Hellfire Club, I mean, you got Sebastian Shaw that can control and absorb kinetic energy. You have Donald Pierce, who's a cyborg. You have Harry Leland, who can control mass. You have Emma Frost, who's like a top tier telepath. And you have Jason Weingart, who's very powerful, because clearly look what he just did to Jean. So the X-Men get taken down pretty easily. But in the midst of that battle, Mastermind and Cyclops do battle on the psychic plane, and Mastermind kills Cyclops in the psychic plane, and Jean sees this, and baby, that's all she needed to see to snap out of that illusion. So she was snapped out of the illusion, but she still played along with it and secretly gave the X-Men the upper hand to escape, because the X-Men were literally bound and, like, tied up. Like, the Hellfire Club had them in a bad position, but they didn't know Jean had reverted back to the good side. So she let the X-Men get the upper hand. The X-Men quickly engaged the Hellfire Club, did battle with them, and came out on top. But in all of this, Jean got the realization of what Mastermind had done. The months of planning, scheming, tampering with her mind, making her think she was crazy. She realized all of this was him. And baby, anybody who knows anything about Jean Grey knows her hair is not red for just no reason. She has a temper. Like, Jean will go from 0 to 100 real quick. And when she got her hands on Mastermind, let me tell you something. She went ham on him. She was like, okay, you want to see what it's like to have power? You want to see what it's like to be a god? I'm going to show you. And she instantly expanded his mind to such a capacity that it overwhelmed him. It overloaded him. He couldn't handle it and was driven insane. Instantly. And the panel where she does this, it goes, at Jean's touch, his mind expands at the speed of thought, racing instantly from one side of reality to the other, through all infinite reaches of space and time. In the blink of an eye, Mastermind finds himself in touch with the universe, his brain flooded with all the myriad, absolute, contradictory truths of existence. He screams, unable to cope. He runs, unable to escape. He drowns. He is, after all, only human, a man of limited awareness, limited power, limited ability, transformed in the twinkling into a god. Some people can handle the experience, some people can't. And then Phoenix goes, enjoy your trip, Jason. You won't be coming back. Okay? Now, mess with Jean Grey's mind if you want to, and that's what happens. And I wish y'all could see the panel. Just Google the panel of Jean fighting Mastermind. When she gets finished with him, he's literally laid in a corner, slumped over, drooling. Like, she left him in a coma, like his mind was instantly destroyed. And while she is going after him, she was like, do you know what you've done? Like, you've played with like a dark side of my mind. Because mind you guys, all of these issues I'm talking about, from like Uncanny X-Men 129, 130, 131, this one, which is 132, 133, 134. This is all part of the Dark Phoenix saga. Okay? So Mastermind really played a key part in the Dark Phoenix saga because he had been tampering with Jean's mind. And Jean knew, like, this is a lot of power to hold, and she knew the responsibility of it, and she was pissed because he had went in there and moved so much stuff around, and she just was afraid of the consequences. And we see what those consequences are. So if you want to check out these issues, they are amazing. Again, Uncanny X-Men 129 through like 135 will give you the whole recap of what I'm talking about here. So Mastermind was left comatose for years. But then he slowly recovered. He was in an insane asylum, but he recovered. And when he recovered, because by this time, when he got well, Jean Grey was dead. The Dark Phoenix saga had come and gone. Jean sacrificed herself. She was no more. So his only option was to get revenge on Jean's loved ones. And Wolverine was one of them. And this is how he chose to do it. By destroying Wolverine's heart. And his heart was Mariko. And so Jason Weingard's whole plan was to have Mariko leave him and destroy him that way. And even when we go back to the Obayun, remember at the beginning of this issue, Rogue and Wolverine were looking for Nabaton Yasuke, which is the Obayun. He was at the meeting with Viper and Silver Samurai. But when they got to his estate, they realized that the real Obayun had been dead for like a week. And Rogue goes, well, if he's been dead for a week, how did Lady Mariko see him at the meeting tonight? All of that was Mastermind. All of that was him. He plays the long game. So he has been in this for a while. And so that's how he chose to destroy Wolverine. And there were other people on his list as well. I had been reading some old back issues and looking at some old interviews online. And he was even going after Mystique. And now Mystique was the victim this time. She wasn't the low down, dirty, messy blue heifer causing the messiness. She was actually a victim because there was an unpublished Miss Marvel story. And evidently in that story, according to Chris Claremont, it had something to do with Mastermind and the Hellfire Club and him trying to, again, climb up the ranks or just get power. And Mystique foiled those plans. So once he recovered, in order to get back at Mystique, he tampered with Rogue's mind. Yeah, he tampered with Rogue's mind and caused it to unbalance the portions of the Miss Marvel psychic that she had absorbed from Carol Danvers, which he knew would cause Rogue to run to Mystique's enemy, which is Charles Xavier, for help. So Mastermind was behind all of that. And he had been haunting Raven. Raven is Mystique, for any of you all who don't know. She went by the name Raven Darkholme. He had been haunting Raven's dreams for a long time, like taunting her. So Mastermind had a hit list of people, and this is how he got his revenge on Wolverine. Ain't that crazy? You talking about being petty. Okay, now that's some pettiness. Like, I'm gonna wait years to get my revenge and playing the long game. He playing it like Cardi B. Those girls came out with them records and dissed Cardi B. Cardi B let it go. And she playing her whole album. She hadn't dropped the album in 7 years. And then when that album came out, she went back and dissed everybody that had dissed her throughout the years. That's how you do it. So Mastermind is the Cardi B of the Marvel Universe, because he is... But no, his story doesn't stop there. Neither does Logan and Mariko's. You guys can read up on what happened. Mastermind did eventually die from the legacy virus, which was a virus that affected mutants, and him and Jean made amends by the time he died. And just like a lot of other mutants, good and bad, he was resurrected on Krakoa years later and played a part in some things going on there. So yeah, that's it. That is it. That is Uncanny X-Men 172 and 173, Wolverine's Wedding, the Japan Adventure, or again, as I like to call these 2 issues, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Because baby, everybody and their mama tried their best to crash this wedding, and it looks like at the end of the day, Mastermind is the one that succeeded. Ain't that crazy? Anyway, I won't hold you guys any longer because I will go on and keep on talking about the X-Men. I just want to thank you for joining me on another episode of the Messy Mutant Tea, where we're going back looking at all of my favorite Uncanny X-Men issues from the Claremont run. We have so much in store, so much fun things planned, so many issues I can't wait to dive into because I'm so excited and I love these issues so much. So I hope you guys will continue to take that ride with me. And in the meantime, stay mutant, stay messy, and I will holler at you later. Peace.
It's the messy mutant tea with ONEGAREDD. Let's go. It's the messy mutant tea with ONEGAREDD. Let's go.